All right, well, hello and welcome to another Microvellum live event. My name is Clay, and on behalf of our team and those supporting this event today, we are glad that you are here with us once again. We are broadcasting here from our Southern Oregon headquarters on this 25th day of October. And so these live educational free events are hosted every Wednesday for your benefit. So whether you are a user looking to expand your knowledge or here today to evaluate what we do and to get a taste of how we support our users, either way, we welcome you to today's event. So we are streaming on two platforms right now. We are here on our Zoom platform, as we have most of our users or attendees logged in to, as well as our YouTube live stream. So you can ask a question at any time on either platform. Simply click that green button, the Q&A button there in the Zoom navigation panel to type your question, or you can use the comments area on our YouTube stream, and we will get you the answers that you need throughout the duration of this event. We are also recording this today's event, and it will be available within the next few days on our website as well as our help center. If you haven't subscribed to us on YouTube, we recommend that you do that, and you will receive notifications on future live events. All right, so with the release of 15.5 behind us, we are going to focus the next hour and 15 minutes or so on the best practices for managing your updates. Since the live launch a few weeks ago, we've had hundreds of people download the update, but there are some that, well, quite a few that may be in the process of evaluating what to do, looking at the version, seeing what new features are there, maybe still considering or even how you get this update installed, or how you deliver it to your teams, or maybe even release it to your production. So that's what we're going to focus today's topic all about. And so here to help us navigate this process and refine your implementation planning is our team of experts. We have Daniel Peel, Doug Morris, Lenny Sienna, Shane Governor, David Barris, and of course, Lucas Marquez. And so to kick things off, let's reintroduce you to some of the changes that you will see in this latest update. We reviewed these a couple weeks ago in that live launch event, but here to help us, we've asked Daniel to give us an overview again on some of the areas that he's been working on. So Daniel, let's first have a look at the new specifications group interface. Let's have a look at what's changed, and thanks again for joining us.
Hey, thanks, Clay. Yeah, so we have shown this interface a few times so far, but when you're updating, one of the more disruptive things that can really cause your day-to-day procedures to change is just interface changes. So we really want to make sure that everyone knows about this change. It is a big one from past versions of Microvellum Software. And I do see a lot of familiar names on this, so this might be a little bit of a review, some knowledge reinforcement, but it is good to know how this interface works for those of you that are unaware of this change. So the big thing that we heard at our previous TechCon was our spec group interface was not meeting the needs of our customers. Setting up when you begin a project and you actually begin setting up the spec groups for it, we kept hearing time and time again that it was very time consuming to set up all your spec groups and be able to make sure everything is ready so that way your drafters can begin actually using this project. So we took a lot of feedback from our forums and got a lot of feedback from our customers, and we created a brand new project spec group setup interface. So to access this, we're going to go to our toolbox setup menu, and we're going to go to advanced project setup. So before, in previous versions, we used to just get a single list of our spec groups with the components that were in there. We didn't really have a way to actually see all of the components that are available inside this project. So right away, you can see that a lot more is going on. On the let's take a look at the left-hand side here. On the left-hand side is our specification group tree. So we can open up each of these little nodes here, and this is going to show us all of the spec groups and the files associated to those spec groups. On the right-hand side, we have our components tree. So these are the individual spec group components that make up each specification group. So what's really cool is on the left-hand side, the first thing we can do is if we click on any of these files here, you'll see that we get a little blue highlight to show us that all of these files are linked. So right now inside of this project, I only have one project wizard file and one global file. So even though they're listed a few different times, all of these components are the exact same file. So if we make a change to one, we actually are editing all of the spec groups. But if we take a look at our PL1 material here, we can see that this is the only PL1 material that's assigned to the spec group, and so it's highlighted here, and it shows us that, and no other highlights are shown. So right away, just using this new interface, we get a much more visual feedback about what's going on, what changes we might be about to make. So let's take a look at some of the management tools that we have available for spec groups. So this toolbar across the top, this is how we can manage our specification groups. And first thing we'll do is one thing that people do a lot when they're setting up a job is they start creating new spec groups. So in order to do that, what we'll do is we will select our specification group here, and we will select the copy selected specification group. So what this will allow us to do is not only copy the specification group that we selected, but also copy the components for them. So let's go ahead and name this HDPL, or let's just name this my new spec group. And then we're going to create a copy of our cut parts file and our edge band file. If we want to create copies of the other components, we can go ahead and just select that, and we can see that we get the little text box there to name our new component. But for right now, we'll go ahead and do just a copy of our cut parts. And we're going to set up a different plastic laminate group here. So instead of PL1, we're going to go ahead and do PL5. And we will do the same thing for our edge banding. Now, another time-saving tool is this new find and replace. After you, in the previous interface, if you had set up a specification group and then you wanted to change out the material names, you had to launch the material file and then do a find and replace on the different categories. What we can do directly while copying the spec group is we can actually launch this find and replace. And so we'll go ahead and hit OK. And this is going to load that spec group for us. And now it's just going to ask us to find and replace what. So I know that inside of this material file, we have materials that are PL1, and we're going to replace those with PL5. We go and hit replace text, and it's going to let us know that 38 records were updated for our cut parts file, and then 7 material records were updated for our edge band file. So again, just a time-saving feature to quickly create new spec groups and spec group components. We can now see that that new spec group is listed here. And if we take a look at the right-hand side, we see that those PL5 materials are added to this as well. So we can quickly identify what's going on. Just like in our material file, if you want to assign a different component to the spec group, you can just use this assign button here. So we'll go ahead and we'll select our PL1 material and say we just want to change out this edge band. We can see that we have now assigned a PL1 edge band to this. And I did this because I wanted to highlight another feature here. Over on the right-hand side, we'll have a component file here highlighted in orange. And this is to let us know that this component is no longer being used. So on the right-hand side, this is where we can actually manage the different components. And if we wanted to, now this is unused, we can actually go and delete this out of the project. We can copy any of the components and reassign them. So again, just some steps, some time-saving steps here. A few more of the options, some new features that were added to this interface. We have the ability to open up the individual component files, just like we used to in the older interface. So if we wanted to have access to our project wizard, we can go ahead and just select that button, and it's going to open up the project wizard interface so we can actually edit the variables. One other cool feature that was added is we have the ability to actually access Workbook Designer, which is going to open up the spreadsheet and show us all of the spreadsheet files for all of our different components. So again, just some more features added based off customer feedback. And one last thing that I'd like to show is we had a lot of requests when you are editing inside of a project and inside of a template. It can be hard to remember what you're actually in. Right now I'm actually at the project level, so we can see that we have our project level specification group listed there. But just an added feature that we did just to really make sure you know that you're editing a library template. If you have access, you can go and edit your template level, and you'll see that we get a bright red band across the top just to identify that you are inside of your template making changes. So hopefully that will help alleviate some of the confusion and will allow our customers the tools that they need to set up specification groups.
Awesome. Thanks, Daniel, for that. I really think you users out there are really going to love these refinements to this interface. And if you're using it already, let us know what you think. We'd love to hear from you, get your feedback on this. So let's have another look here at what's changed in 2D part editing. We also reviewed this a few weeks ago, but let's have another closer look. So David, we've been getting a lot of requests to speed up the process for creating 2D parts, not just 2D parts, but also one-off nested parts. The tools we had in place in the previous version, they worked well, but what users really wanted was a faster way to make these parts on the fly, not just the 2D parts, but like I mentioned, the nested parts. And I'm pretty sure at our TechCon event earlier this year, we had a lot of ideas brought to us on how we might refine this. And so we listened. And let's have a look at what has changed.
Okay, so yeah, like you said, I'm going to be showing some of our new 2D machining tools. On my screen, you can see I have my 2D machining tools palette open. And what I'm going to do is just show how, I'm going to walk through the process of how we can create a new nest and add parts and then create G-code, just to show you how quickly and easily this can be done. So to start off, if we want to just add a nest to our drawing, all we have to do is select a material, select the sheet size, and select the work order, and then use this draw feature to put it in our drawing. And then as you can see here, we have a blank nest sheet in our drawing. If we want to add parts to this drawing, all we have to do is go into our parts tab, like I just did, enter a name for our new part and its dimensions, and then select a router for the border and simply place it on our nest. And you can see there that we have a part, and you can just keep doing that as you want. And of course, not all the time you're going to want to be doing square parts. So what we've created the ability to actually design your own parts in AutoCAD using polylines. You can simply drop those onto the nest. You can do whatever you want. You have a lot of freedom there, of course, with AutoCAD. And then you can use our select existing feature to convert those into parts on your nest. And of course, we have all of our existing routing and drilling tools that we've always had, so you can apply machining to those parts and do whatever you need to do. And you're also not limited to just putting parts on your nest. You can actually, if you want, just put like routes and drilling directly onto the nest and use the pick existing entities feature to create a route directly on the nest. And once you have your nest designed the way you want it, you can go back into the nest tools, and we have these features here that are used to edit the nest. You can move the parts, copy, rotate, change set mill. And if you want to create G-code, all you have to do is use the create new G-code from files from drawing feature, select the border of the nest, and then name your G-code file. And we've created G-code for our nest. And there's a lot more that we could do with these 2D machining tools. This is just like a small sample, and we're really looking forward to seeing what our customers come up with and are able to do with these new features.
Awesome. Thanks, David. Again, I really like these changes to this UI, and I think you will too as a user. It's faster, and as you can see here, provides much more flexibility. And if you have not tried this new feature out, or maybe you have tried it out, we'd love to hear from you, see what you think of it. And thanks for showing it off for us again here today, David. All right, I'm going to just take a pause for just a moment. Looks like we've got bunch of good questions coming in here. And so Jason Jackson, so we started this webinar off by saying that this webinar follows the latest release. So yes, October 11th, we had the live launch event, and that is where we showcased a lot more of these new features. So what we're showing you today is kind of the highlights of that. But if you want to catch up on what we did a few weeks ago, we'll go ahead and put a link to the previous webinar here in the comments, and so you can check that out as well. And so yes, there's lots of changes that have been included in this release. Of course, you can also look at our release notes and scan through those hundreds of changes and improvements that this new release offers, and we'll also put a link to that release notes document there in our chat here in just a few moments as well. So we have talked about some of the changes, but let's shift gears and let's talk about the best practices for integrating this new version into your production environment. So let's start at the top. Let's have a look at what it takes to set up a sandbox environment. So first, what do we mean when we say sandbox? Maybe some of you already know what that means, but it's a safe place or a configuration that's going to allow you to evaluate the new features, to test the products and the new update without interfering with the version that you use for production. And so in this sandbox environment, it's not just for testing out the new version either. You know, what if you had a new employee, someone learning? Do you really want them accessing the data that you use for production, making changes, deleting things accidentally, you know, making changes that they didn't really mean to make because they thought they were just testing on their own system? Well, here to help us understand how to set this up is Sean Golden from our support department, who has had some experience with that previous example and helping users recover from those types of situations. So Sean, let's have a look at what it's going to take to set up this sandbox environment.
Sure. Well, just as you mentioned, a lot of people wonder about the term sandbox, but you know, it's really about, you know, keeping the sand uncontaminated, giving your kids a place to play, and keeping your kids clean. And you know, no doubt that's what we want to do in a production environment too. We want to, you know, keep our data uncontaminated. Give our employees a place to be able to do things, and even trainees to be able to play with things without destroying it. Or, you know, also sometimes you'll get, you know, gurus coming in that say they're going to change your library in a way that you've never seen before, and that can end up in a huge mess at times, and missing products, missing data. And so today, yeah, that's what we'll focus on. To get started though, when you think about segmenting your data out and keeping it separate, keeping it uncontaminated, the first thing you'll want to do in all three scenarios today is browse to your factory data. And no matter what the scenario is, when you're there, back up one folder. And whether you're dealing with local CE, compact edition, or server version, SQL Server, you're always going to want to copy and move this to wherever your sandbox location is, and then go ahead and rename that. And that's where your work orders, your DWGs, all that's going to be at. So we'll go ahead and name this sandbox. And then once that's completed, we move on over here, and you'll want to make a new configuration. So you notice here it's production data local. So we're going to want to make a sandbox configuration. So go to Toolbox Setup, copy configuration, and choose your local one, hit OK, and then we're going to call this Sandbox Local. And then we're going to go ahead and hit OK, and then you're going to want to exit out of Toolbox, relaunch. And then once that's relaunched, we're going to want to choose our Sandbox Local. And because it's a copy, we're going to want to change the path. So Toolbox Setup, Options, Data Access, change path to Microvellum Data, and we're just going to change it to the Sandbox. And so there you go. And because it's using compact edition, that's it. That's all you have to do. And then another good thing of this is you can create multiple, you know, mobile laptop versions or anything, so you can kind of go around and do whatever's needed. Now the next part is, what if you have an SQL server? Well, first of all, you're going to want to back up your data. And so you'll want to launch into SQL Server Management Studio with, of course, admin rights. And then a really easy way to make a copy and sandbox your SQL data is just to right-click, go to Tasks, go down to Export Data. And then this will bring up the wizard, and go ahead and hit Next. And then for your data source, there's all kinds of modes of transferring the information, but for simplicity, I'm just going to go down to native client here and pick that one. And you'll notice it's at this SQL server. I'm just going to copy this for the next step and make sure it's in your production data. Go ahead and hit Next. And then for your destination, you're going to want to use the same mode to copy. So in that case, I pick the same one. And then for the server name, you're just going to want to pick, if it's the same server you're working in, just go ahead and make sure it's pointed to that same server. And then because it's going to be a new copy of your database, click New, and then name it anything you like. But for this, we're going to name it Sandbox Server. And then go ahead and just go with the defaults. It's okay. Then go ahead and hit Next. And then you want to copy the data from one or more table views. Next. Select all the tables. And then what that's going to do is bring your data over. Go ahead and hit Next, Finish, and then that's going to copy all your tables. Now to save some time while that's doing that, we're going to want to create a copy of your server configuration. So let's go ahead and launch into your production server here. All right. And then go into Toolbox, Options, Data Access. Make sure it's pointed to the right one. Okay, and then we'll just copy this configuration. Make sure we copy the server one. We'll call it Sandbox Server. Go ahead and hit OK. Exit out. Check on it. Looks like it's all done. Awesome. Of course, in a real environment, it's going to take a little bit longer, but to copy all that data over. So we'll go ahead and launch into our new configuration here. And then we'll just minimize real quick, verify that our data did in fact copy over. And so there you go. It's copied over. So now that we're in our new configuration, go to Toolbox, Setup, Options, Data Access, and change your path to the folder that we copied originally. That'll hold all your work orders and drawings and such. And then the only thing you need to do here is switch it to your Sandbox configuration, hit Close, and there you go. Now, one thing you'll want to make sure is that you give the user access. So whatever user you're using for your production data, you're going to want to go in here and make sure that that same user has access. And you'll want to do this prior to launching Toolbox, and then make sure production data, DDO, make sure that this is set to the same, DB owner, okay. And he's got all the rights that they need. So the next time you launch into Toolbox, it'll be there. Now another question that comes up from time to time is actually, I want to transfer my SQL data to a local copy. And so how do I do that? So let's go ahead and launch into there. And for that, you're going to want to use your SQL Server Management Studio. Go up to your production data, right click on it, then standard reports, and then just check how big it is, because if it's over 4 gigabytes, then you're going to have to maybe create a sandbox copy, strip it down, and then move it over. But in this case, as we can see, it's only about 8 megs, so we're good to go to transfer that on over to create a sandbox local copy that makes you a little more mobile. So for that, you just go back in, Toolbox Setup. Now that we know that, we go to Options, Data Access, and then we'll go ahead and just transfer tables on over. So transfer to SQL CE, factory, transfer, and then instead of your production, go into your sandbox, factory database, hit OK. And it'll transfer that data right on over.
Hey, Sean, while you're waiting for that progress bar, I've got a question coming in live.
Sure.
You want to answer that for us?
We're done. Yeah, go ahead. Fire away.
Eugene asks, is it required to get and install new SQL 2016, or can we use the old one, SQL 2014?
Right now we recommend 2012 to 2016, so you can use any version in between there. I mean, you could still use 2008, but there's a lot more like better querying capability and better CPU usage with 2012 to 2016.
All right, thanks for answering that.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, yeah, thanks, Sean, for that. There's a couple other live questions that were coming in here. I think we did a good job at answering them. Matthew is asking, what's the number or what's the limit of sandboxes you can have? Why might you want to set up more than one? And so I think Shane did answer that question, but I don't know if you want to highlight your recommendations there, or maybe observations on how people might set up more than one, reasons for that.
Yeah, well, I mean, basically, if you've hired on some new employees, I mean, you may want to, create a local copy of your SQL data, or if you're working local already, just make another copy so that they can go in there and they can, learn without messing up your production data.
Right.
So, yeah, and testing, I mean, not necessarily testing it, it's good to have a environment for upgrading, but also, testing new things that you may be wanting to do with your library. I mean, if you're going to make a major overhaul to your spec groups or do some really crazy things, hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, I think it does. I think that's great. Definitely some great instruction here for people to consider before beginning an update, or even after, for new users, like was mentioned, to get familiar with Microvellum. So I think that's good. I think you users out there who are tuned in today might want to watch the recording on this piece to make sure that you follow those steps carefully so that you can get your own sandbox environment set up. Okay, so let's shift gears again, and we are going to talk about our OEM. So what if you are using the OEM? Our toolbox application is available for standard AutoCAD, of course, but we also have an OEM version. So how do you deal with the latest OEM release? Right now we have the OEM 2018 release that's supported here on this latest 15.5 release. And so many of you maybe are using an OEM 2017, 2016, maybe even 2015. So Shane, what would you recommend to users who are getting ready to run this update? What steps should they go through, checklist items, to consider before getting started here with this OEM? You there, Shane? You might want to unmute.
Yes, thank you. I am here. Thank you.
Perfect.
Sorry.
All right.
I would be happy to talk to you about that, show you everything. We did release OEM 18. It is out and it is available, and it is proving to be a really good platform. AutoCAD made a lot of changes to it, a lot of security and just stability improvements to this version, and I like it a lot, and I think a lot of people who have already used it are seeing the same thing. And let's keep in mind too that if you are on OEM subscription, you can begin requesting now your install and serial numbers from your account manager. And if you have any questions with that, contact your account manager and they can get you the information you need on that. So migrating to this version. So let's say you had 17, or you had other even previous versions. Let's say you had really any of our software installed and you want to migrate some of your changes up to this version. So how can you do that? Well, in years past, it did prove to be a little bit difficult for some users to migrate those settings up, either reset them up or various things we could do. And there was also some questions or concerns that people had with the versions interfere with each other. When you did certain operations, sometimes what you did this version would affect that version. Well, when we get in this version ready, we really listened to these issues that our customers are having to step back. Okay, how can we improve this feature, this step? Well, in this version, I'll show you what we've done. So I'm going to go ahead and fire it up here. And here it is. So when this is a startup screen that you see in OEM 18, this is what this is. And you'll see this button here now. It's the Migrate Configurations button will appear right here. So in this one here, you see I only have two configurations. I have just the 46.1 and then the AU library. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to migrate my previous year. So I have 16 installed and I have standard. So really what the software is doing is it's scanning the registry and finding what of our software you have installed and then finding those configurations So that's what you see here on the left side. On the right side, these are all the preferences that you would have. So those would be your tool strip dialogues, all your various settings that you would done. So all your tool buttons, if you customize all those would be on your preferences, and some other options are there. So in this case here, I want to take my OEM 16 configuration, and I'm going to take this one from standard. So that would be, again, everything in your configuration. So that is the majority of your options. That's your path to Microvellum data. That's your server settings. Everything is stored in that configuration. And I'm also going to take my preferences from my 16. I'm going to hit OK. And this screen comes up when it finds something that already exists in your registry. Now, it's not going to merge it. It's basically going to override those settings that you already have. So if I found another configuration with that same setting, it's going to delete it basically and bring in this one. So be careful of that, but it will work just fine. So I'm going to say yes, I want to override those with this one. Now they're in. So now I need to shut down to get those changes. So I will shut this down and start it back up again. Now I have them in there. So I have the 42 library that I picked, and also the 46.2 metric. So now I can just go ahead and start using it. And it's good. So that will be 100% copy of what was existing in the previous one. So 16, it's 100% match of what was existing there. So it's very simple, very straightforward, and works good. It's as simple as that.
All right, thanks, Shane. We do have a couple questions that I think we should probably highlight the answers for here live. And so one of them is, can you have multiple OEMs on the same machine? And if you do, will they interfere with each other?
Yes, you can definitely have multiples on the same machine. As you saw, I have multiples on mine. That's actually pretty trimmed down from what I typically have. And they do not interfere with each other. Like I said, in previous years, there was a little bit of confusion on whether that would work or not. This one here, 18, is 100% isolated. So you can have anything you want on as far as other years on there, and they will not interfere with each other. So sometimes that's also a good way to use a sandbox, if you will. So it's 100% isolated. So it does work just fine.
All right, that's great. And so the common question, follow-up question to that often is, well, how long can I have that previous version on my computer? Is it ever going to expire, or what's going to happen to it?
Yes, so once you install it and you activate your serial number for this OEM, the previous one, it will expire after some time has elapsed. And if you do need an extension on that or some more further details on that, you need to contact your account manager, and they can tell you everything you need to know about that, but it will expire after some time.
Awesome. All right. Thanks for that information. And again, that's some good information to cover there for those who are considering getting that OEM upgrade in place. All right. So now let's assume that your sandbox is all set up. You've installed the update. You have your OEM all installed. You've gone through this process that Shane just helped us with. But now have you considered what it's going to take to make sure that you've gone through all the testing needed to release this update into your production? Do you know that your users are trained on some of the new features that we've included in this release? Well, here to help us get familiar with some of these items and some of the things that you should be considering on what we might call a production-ready checklist is Lucas Marquez. So Lucas, we are not talking about reports today. That's next week. But let's run through some of our recommended steps here to explain how we might determine whether or not this version or a version someone may download is production ready.
Welcome, everybody. I'm going to be talking about process testing today. We talked a little bit about the sandbox environment and how the sandbox can help you with training and whatnot for new people who are coming in. But it also helps you with some process testing just to make sure that as far as your process goes as a company, that if any of the, your specific activities were affected by maybe a bug that got fixed or a new feature that's in there, it kind of lets you know that you need to test that and make sure it's production ready. So part of getting things ready for production ready is to develop some kind of process testing documentation. And some of this documentation just includes some general functionality such as, maybe opening a project, drawing, modifying specification groups, using part properties, product properties. But essentially what it does is it just lets you develop a update plan. It gives you certain milestones that you can have to track your testing progress. And it helps define steps in the process, in your process testing that you're going to be taking. It also allows you to have some easy navigation for the Microvellum software, identifies key components and modules that you're using as a company in your daily activities, defines some standard operating procedures, and helps identify some low-level functionality. And it allows you to clearly define processes for anyone who might be testing your processes to understand what needs to happen in the testing environment, and where everything they might need to have is, such as different tool files, different processing stations, for example. Part of developing a document testing is to identify areas that your company uses. You want to check some specific functionalities, such as if your company uses perfect graining pretty often, if you have true shape nesting or using the solid modeling tools during your daily activities. Those are things that you want to keep track of in your process testing. That way you know that those things are working normally before you enter into a production environment with the update. On my screen here, what I have was a sample process checklist. And this is kind of a sample process checklist that you can use. They're going to be different from company to company. Everybody has something slightly different. So in the first example here, I just had something as simple as, creating a project, creating a new room, modifying specification groups, whether that's a find and replace for your materials, creating a work order, processing a nest, processing true shape nesting, and then verifying the results. Another example that you might have is something, if you're using template projects, maybe you need to copy a template project to start a new one. Maybe you use your solid modeling tools in your daily activities. So that's maybe something that you want to go through and just make sure that your processes that you use with the solid modeling tools are correct. Maybe instead of doing nesting, you use sawing and single part G-code. So you might want to process your parts using those stations and just verify your results as well. Another thing that we provide you that will be good during your process testing is the release notes. The release notes are placed on the forums under the install, update, and diagnosis section in the subsection called release notes. The release notes are good because it highlights any important bug fixes that came out, any new features that might have been available, and it just gives a really detailed list of things that have changed in the program. It'll help increase your awareness of the program changes so that you kind of know if there's anything that changed that's going to affect your processes. So for example, in the screenshot here, you can see that solid modeling tools have had some changes to it, as well as the 2D machining tools, which we saw David present to us earlier today. So since those are things that have changed in the hotfix, if you use your 2D machining tools pretty often during your daily use, you might want to just run through a quick little process of what you normally do to make sure that everything is, having the results that are expected for it. Once you have your process documentation developed and you have a good process you're going to be going through, the next step would be to actually update your software and start testing those processes in the sandbox. Here, I just have a little screenshot so you can verify that the update was installed correctly. We show the version number of the software that you're running in the top right-hand corner of your splash screen. So once you install an update, if you look to that version number and you see it's a 15.5, you'll be able to know, okay, yep, I updated successfully, I'm there. And once you've updated, you can go through all your process testing, document your results, make sure everything's going well. If any issues are encountered during the testing procedure, you wouldn't want to deploy that update onto your production workstations. We'd encourage you to submit a ticket to the technical support team so they could review the issues, verify if this is really like a bug that maybe got missed or something like that, or if there's a data issue, maybe the data just needs to be changed a little bit. If testing verifies successful, then you can determine a schedule to deploy the update to all your production workstations. You'd want to be sure to have a backup of your database. Backups are always very important. Just that way, if anything does go wrong or there's an issue, you have a way to go back. And that's all I had to share today as far as process testing.
Awesome. Thanks, Lucas, for that. Definitely, this is another piece that is very important that we all consider, especially those who are looking to run these updates to stay current, getting the checklist in place to ensure that you've gone through all the necessary steps to make sure that your team is ready, your systems are in place to be successful. So as always, great job, Lucas. Did a great job there. All right. So, and we look forward to hearing from you next week too in our advanced reporting live event that we're going to have. So do you have your checklists in place? Well, hopefully you start thinking about one if you don't, but you might want to make sure that you consider what you'll do with your product library. We've been talking about the software itself, but there's obviously the other component that's very important, and that is your product library. And so over time, I can imagine the innovations, the variations of products that's been configured for your users who have been busy building these different types of things using the tools. But we've been busy too. And so we recently released a new product library. And so you might be wondering how you make the decision to update. How do you ignore the updates? Do you abandon yours and switch to the new? Well, these are often questions that our users have to deal with. And so here to help us out to kind of understand how the process works is Lenny. And so, yeah, Lenny, this is a topic that comes up frequently. And I know we've been working hard to develop some amazing new products, even making changes to improve the speed and flexibility and things like that. But let's help our users figure out how to integrate or adopt these changes into their own data.
Yes, no problem, Clay. How do I update my library? Yes, it's probably my favorite question, right? It is probably the most common question we get a lot about the library data. The answer can be a difficult topic to address because every Microvellum user out there, all you guys are coming from a different situation. So the answer is kind of a case-by-case scenario usually. I usually recommend when you're thinking about a new library, you definitely want to have a conversation with your account manager, and that's part of their job, right? And kind of help you evaluate your particular situation and help advise what's going to be the best path or the best option for you. But that being said, I think it would be helpful in this webinar to take a few minutes to talk about kind of in general terms what your options are and explain why this can be a little tricky and why it is so tricky for some people. It's a tough decision because when you're updating the Microvellum, the program, which is what we've been talking about so far today, that's really kind of a piece of cake in so much as you just compared to the spreadsheet data, you just all you do is just the program is just like a black box that you don't really have any control over. So you just run that executable, and if you don't like something or you want to roll back, you just run the old one, and then you're back to where you started. But in the library data, since it's not a black box, that's what makes it so powerful. It's so user definable. It's you've got this set of user definable spreadsheets, so having that just automatically update can be a difficult thing to automate. And believe me, we've tried. Microvellum just has no way to anticipate what you may have done to some of those spreadsheets or all of them. So with those thoughts in mind, I have a little thing here, kind of help us decide like a decision thing. So you want to upgrade. So really, I kind of put some thought into this, was thinking about most people, and this is again in general terms, but you're going to fall into one of two camps. So in the scenario one up here, maybe all of it you've done in your library to date is just set up some globals, set up your wizards, variables, maybe you added your materials, assign the pointers, and you more or less, use the library as it is, as it came to you. So whatever options that were in there, that's just what you used. And whatever things that you did maybe add, you did a good job of isolating them or keeping a good record of what you added. So if that's you, I would recommend just install the new library, duplicate those wizard and global variable changes. And we have some videos that show you how you can do that pretty quick. You can also export materials, reassign, any new materials that you've added. You don't have to re-input them. It's just data. You can just export them out and suck them into the new database. And then any maybe products, even if you've come from 6.7, you can also pull those out, bring them in. and you're off to the races. But where it starts getting a little more complicated is this. A lot of people fall into the second scenario, and not that any one of these is right or wrong. It's just how what your situation is. Scenario 2 is you've made significant modifications. You've altered how the products are behaving or the subassemblies, or you've added a bunch of your own hardware, and you didn't really, maybe it's been a number of years. There's no way you could have recorded all of those changes. So if that's you, then there's really kind of 3 choices that you have. One, you can just, keep the existing library, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. That's what makes Microvellum so powerful, is it's your data, and you can enhance it to be more competitive to your competitor, around the corner. So you can just keep it. And this is kind of what I did for many years. Before I came to Microvellum, I managed companies' data, and what I would do is when a new library came out, I would go ahead and install it, not for the purpose of using it, but I would just kind of cherry pick things out. I'd reverse engineer things. I'd see, hey, what are those guys up to these days? And I would just see, whatever, and I would pull stuff out of it and blend it into mine. Of course, that requires a little bit of know-how, but with a little bit of persistence, it's really not that hard in a lot of cases. So that's one option. Second option is you can, and this is more of like a temporary thing, I would say, but you can simultaneously run like 2 libraries at once. So the way this version works now, it does support multiple libraries. So you can, install the new library, export it, import it into your database. You can kind of bounce back and forth, and that way maybe that will buy you some time to where you can get some benefits of the new library, yet not totally abandon all of your old stuff. The reason I say this is temporary, that could start to become a maintenance. It is extra maintenance, because you've got 2 sets of globals and 2 sets of wizards, and I don't know, it's probably not a situation you want to live in for very long, but it does work. And the third option is bite the bullet, cut the cord, just archive your old library, start over with a whole new foundation. A lot of times, features that you've added over the years, you may find, hey, Microvellum added them also. So you don't even have to redo that. There's a lot of new features that are in this, in the newer libraries. So that's just something you can do. And then, also bring in your materials like we talked about earlier. So that's kind of how I broke it down. On our
Hey,
helps.
Lenny, we got a question.
Yes, sure.
On YouTube, we answered it in text, but I think everybody would benefit from hearing this. So M. Stangler asks, can you send this out as a PDF to your subscribers, please? And we answered, yes, we'll post that on our help center.
Send what, this little chart here?
Yes, sir.
Sure, yeah, that's no problem.
All right.
And I am looking in, let's see. Yeah, you could migrating your library, and there's some articles in here about this whole process of, actually this is about actually migrating your data. That's not the one I wanted. I think the one I wanted was somewhere else. It's under Q&A. Here it is, updating your Microvellum library. There we have a section called library install and update subcategory. And so here's just a little bit more of what I just talked about in depth. I think it's like a half an hour where I really go into deep as you make this decision and look at options, so you can kind of review this this video here. I think I covered everything I was going to cover. My time is probably up, but appreciate everybody. So we got any other questions?
Yeah, Lenny, one of the other things that we get asked a lot, and it's a feature, I can't remember exactly when we included this feature, but the ability to just basically install the new library, to just test it out without even interfering with your other, having multiple libraries. That's really going to help people. There's some questions that came in, from Matthew about comparing this library, the new one, with what he's got. And so that's definitely that ability to have two or 3 or 4, or as many as you need
Well,
on one system.
luckily, the way the libraries come to you, you'll download an executable, and it's totally safe to run because it absolutely does not overwrite anything. All it's going to do is you'll run it, and then you'll come into here. Well, when you open up, kind of like what we saw earlier with the configurations that Shane was showing us, you'll just get an extra. I've got a bajillion of them here. It's crazy because I've got, but it'll just create a new configuration on your splash screen. You'll just pick that, and it's a whole new fresh database with a whole new fresh set of graphics, and you can explore and experiment. Maybe that can be the basis of your new sandbox.
Right, and that is a question I wanted to make clear to clear up, is that in order to have a separate library or even download the one, we always recommend having a sandbox environment. And even if you are in that sandbox environment, it's not, you can have multiple libraries set up
Yes.
outside of what we ran through. So you don't have to create, more than one sandbox to get that done. You just have that one sandbox where you have multiple libraries.
Right. So that's the other thing. That's a bit of a paradigm shift if you've come from older versions like version 6 and 6.7 where the configuration equaled your library. And that's kind of different now. Now the configuration equals a database. And each database, like in my case here, I can change libraries. So this particular database, I have 4 libraries in it. All right. So that's what, you get into. How you can get that is you can export and import libraries. You definitely want to do a backup just to be safe before you do that. Every once in a while you'll get funny things can happen, but for the most part I think that should work. Where this is how you could take a library in and out. And what that means is it'll add it. And again, I review that in that video. This guy here, I talk about that as well in greater detail. So maybe I should just leave it at that.
Yeah, that's great. There were some questions that came in. Somebody just...
A list of changes. I see it too. If globals were changed and or wizard, I think it would be easy to do the change for new one. Yeah, so under Help Center, we have this is where you download the library. All right, so here's the latest one that we've posted. But we do put the release notes. Yeah, we go through great effort nowadays to explain every new product, every new global that's been added or removed, every new feature that's been fixed or enhanced or added. And this is kind of a new thing here, library add-ons. There's a video where we have a library import and export utility. So for example, this is a product that was provided by another Microvellum user that thought maybe others could benefit from. So we went ahead and I dressed it up a little bit. It's a new angled ADA sync product, okay? And so we packaged it up, and this can be imported into your library, assuming you've got one of the more recent ones. So a lot of cool things on this help site, guys. So definitely want to keep on top of it or what's been added.
All right. Well, I think that that covers it there for that part, Lenny. So yeah, Once again, great job there, and
no problem.
All right. Yeah, so we've been putting a lot of, as Lenny's been talking about, a lot of focus on these product libraries, and there's been a lot of improvements. So, Doug, we have examined some of the highlights and changes in this latest release. We've discussed how users should move forward with it, creating the sandbox and going through their testing and creating a checklist, and now they've got the new library. But we want to take a few minutes to, here at the tail end of this webinar, to kind of look at and discuss what we've been up to in terms of documentation. I think this is a great segue on Lenny's part into what you've been working on.
Yeah, thanks, Clay. I just want to tell you that I'm really pleased to have the responsibility of documenting Microvellum. And basically, there's 2 reasons that I could think of that documentation for software is important, and these might be obvious, but really the scope of Microvellum Software give it the ability to do an amazing variety of things, but along with that flexibility comes the possibility, or maybe even the probability, that it won't be used to its full capabilities. So I feel like documentation is the equivalent of turning the lights on in some of these lesser used rooms, areas of the software. And so that, then you can see what the full potential of the software is, see if you can use it in a different way to make your company money, make you money. And then the second thing is it provides new users with an alternative for using the software. So one of the options we have is classroom training with a certified trainer. Second is remote learning using video conferencing software. And then a third would be self-paced learning through the knowledge-based tutorials. And that second reason is really the basis for this section of our live event, because we're going to talk about the educational resources that are available from Microvellum from the Help Center with a paid subscription. So that's the focus. And then how those resources can help you manage your update to 15.5. So that's simply put what we'll talk about. So that being said, I'd like to get your input. So here is a poll that's focusing on how you best learn. So if you could quickly select your option there, which way that you prefer to learn. And we'll give it just a few moments for everyone to be able to do that. All right. Very good. Looks like majority have taken the poll, so let's go ahead and close it. It does appear that probably a consensus is that the best documentation is maybe a combination, some written texts, written articles with text, and including some how-to videos. So that's kind of what we expected. And it makes sense because for some people, reading is not their favorite pastime. They would rather watch a short video explaining how to do something, and that's fine. And then other folks, they just want to get on with their job. They would rather scan a written article to find that little bit of information they want. They don't want to have to be watching a complete video or try to scrub through it, starting and stopping to find this little reference for what this property is or what this setting is. So they prefer written articles. So we're going to accommodate both groups, both of you. We'll be making Help Center articles that have text in them, screenshots, and many times an embedded instructional video. So hopefully that will eliminate the learning differences that we all have. So I thought it was also just a side note about video length. Sometimes we have to make a difficult choice between the length of a video and student engagement. There's been some interesting research done on learning and the length of time you have the attention of a learner. And what they found was kind of interesting, that the attention of a learner, and this was in a video context, but the attention a learner gives to a video drops off pretty steeply after just 2 minutes. So you have their attention for 2 minutes, full attention. It drops again at 6 minutes, drops again at 12 minutes, and so on until the video, just becomes a bunch of images moving in front of our eyes. And we've probably all experienced that. I know I have. So it's our strategy to make our videos from 2 to 5 minutes and less than 20 minutes, as a maximum almost all the time. So for those videos that do approach 20 minutes, it's especially important that we have a written outline in the article in addition to the video. So we're working on that. And so I just thought those were some interesting facts from the realm of learning psychology there. Might help you to understand the reasons for our structuring the Help Center the way we do. So what is our current documentation focus? Well, first of all, we're involved now in reorganizing the Help Center, as you saw from just previously as we dipped our toes into it. So when you have a question about how to use Microvellum, we want your first thought, your first knee-jerk reaction to be, let me go to the Microvellum knowledge base, support.microvellum.com. So this is in the process of completion, but here's what we have so far. So on the screen, I have a browser in which I've logged into the Microvellum Help Center at support.microvellum.com. So you'll notice just the structure of our Help Center, and you're probably familiar with this, but let me hit the high points. Very important component is this search bar at the very top, and we'll talk more about that in just a little bit. Then under that we have some shortcut buttons to various other areas of microvellum.com and web page material. Section on spotlight articles, updated articles that you might find useful. And then our knowledge base article section is what we're going to focus on. I was thinking you might think about this in terms of maybe you love to read books. So in a technical book, sometimes you have sections and chapters and subheadings. Well, you could think about these in a similar way. So all of these subjects that you see in bars could be thought of as sections. If you open a section, you'll see the chapters that we have in the bold type, and then the articles are the subheadings. So that might help you to think about this. You'll notice in the install, update, diagnosis, we have installation guides, information, how to install the software, configuration, diagnosis, common issues that our users run into. This will save you time in your quest for support if you can find an answer here without having to submit a support request, support ticket. You'll notice in the downloads area, we have different information on downloading product libraries. All our report current downloads are here, split up in different categories. And then if we continue on, we have a Fluid Designer section that's very popular. Everything you ever wanted to know about Fluid, hopefully. We have an engineering production that's full of good information. Here's a good example of what I was talking about, an article that has both written text and a how-to embedded video. So this is focusing on the 15.5 spec group interface. So a little bit of an overview discussion with some screenshots explaining the differences in the windows, reference for the buttons in the new spec group interface, and then an embedded video on the bottom that you can watch. So that should be helpful for those of you that like to learn in that way. Now, as you notice, the list here is pretty extensive. This is all in an area that I'm logged into as a paid subscription user. So let me show you the difference in an area where we're not logged in as a paid user. Here's just the public area. So if I was interested in Microvellum, I was investigating the software, you can still come to support.microvellum.com and have access to information. But as you'll notice, the lists are more abbreviated. The hope is that we put everything here that a trial user of Microvellum would need, maybe to install, to learn about the software. We have our webcast recordings of our live events, an archive here. So that's the difference in those two areas of Microvellum. All right, so let's go back and talk about that search bar a little bit more. So we're putting a lot of thought and effort into how to improve the search capabilities of Help Center. We have some tools that are at our disposal that we're using. But again, our goal is that when you enter something in the search bar here, you find the articles you need without a ton of irrelevant information. And sometimes that's been a problem. It continues to be a problem that we're working at and addressing daily. But as an example, let's say that you're curious about the new 15.5 dynamic product images. So you know that they're called flat shot tokens. So let's say we're interested about the parameters of those flat shot tokens. And so I enter in the search of flat shot parameter. And the article that comes up first is the flat shot token reference sheet. So this is an article that explains what the tokens are, what their parameters are, gives you some options for the parameters, tries to give you a complete explanation of that. And then at the very end of the article, in case you want a PDF to distribute to others that use these at your organization, you can download that there. So we want you to be able to use that search bar when you have questions. And so in the next few months, you will notice improvement in your search results. So let us know how we're doing in that area. On an unrelated subject, if you remember last week at the live event, I had talked a little bit about an AutoCAD commands document that I made available. And that document was focused on our AutoCAD standard users. So it was great for those users, but maybe you watched that and you thought, hold on now, what about me? I'm using Microvellum OEM Toolbox. What do? I can't use that standard AutoCAD document. Well, I'm happy to announce that the development team has done work to generate a command list for Toolbox users. So you'll be able to enter those commands in the Toolbox command prompt to directly access the command without having to click a series of buttons. So I think that's a great time and click saver. Also, you can configure one button access to them if that's how you prefer to work. So there is currently an article on the Help Center containing the list of commands. And again, if you're curious about that, go to support.microvellum.com. In the search bar, enter Microvellum commands, and that article will come up at the top of the list. And then more information will be coming in the Help Center in the next few days, maybe a couple of weeks, on how to use those in various ways to help your organization. So now that you know our documentation philosophy, you've seen what we're working on, and you understand our focus for the search capabilities of the Help Center, we hope you'll benefit from these and other documentation projects coming up in the next year.
All right, awesome, Doug. And I would definitely agree. It's nice to have you at the helm of this documentation project, and we also have lots of other people helping to contribute to this. And as I mentioned there in the chat, we have daily videos being added daily to this, and so it is nice to see this with some focus, and as it's growing there with additional documentation daily, so that's good. Another area while your screen is shared there, I don't know if you want to navigate to that while I'm talking about it, but most of you probably already know, but for those of you who are not yet Microvellum users, or maybe you're new, we also have an online community. And so this is a great place to go to get peer-to-peer or user-to-user feedback. In some cases, a lot of people offer best practices on how to use the software, not just in the software, but maybe it's related to purchasing of materials or different workflows within a shop. Lots of communication happens here within our community from users all around the world. So if you've not checked that out, I definitely encourage you to do so. If you're a user and don't have access to this help site, please reach out to your account manager and we will get you access to this help center. All right, so we've presented a lot of information today. We've touched on a lot of different topics to ensure that your experience with this latest release is a positive one. And so we're very excited to release it. And if you have not had a chance yet to download it and explore this version for yourself, I definitely encourage that you get started. Get started by setting up that sandbox, getting your configuration ready to begin playing with it, and thinking about your workflows as far as your production checklist to get it out into release mode there in your shop. So that will about do it for this live event today, but I do have a couple of announcements here to make before we sign off, some important ones actually this time. And but before I do that, let me go ahead and launch our performance poll. We'd like to collect some information just to make sure that we keep doing these live events satisfaction, and they're meeting what you want to see weekly. So let me launch that real fast. All right, let me move this out of the way. So this week has been a busy one for sure, and tomorrow we have a special event that we are hosting at 1:30. It's a special announcement. I can't say too much about it, but I can say that it's definitely one that you're not going to want to miss. It's a special event happening at 1:30. It'll be, you can sign up for it on our website right now. And it will be, it will be one that you definitely want to participate in. Also, back by popular demand is Lucas. He's on deck to help us out with another advanced report training session. Reports are such a vital part of your product data, and it's nice to see that Lucas is ready to help us out with another advanced class there next week. And so you can tune into that one next week and register for it there on our website. All right. Well, we definitely appreciate you taking the time to join us today, and we look forward to you coming back next week. And until next time, we hope you have a great rest of your week.